back to the podcast, everybody. Today we're talking to Jesse Smith. Jesse, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so like you said, Jesse Smith, right? I'm the owner of Takedown Media. I've been covering wrestling since about 2017. I had an opportunity to coach back then, and I realized there was a lack of quality content covering the sport. And I felt like because my history wasn't really like as a wrestler, wrestling's not really a part of my like bloodline, that my best way to help the sport was to tell the stories and cover the wrestlers and put together some really good stuff that matches the effort and the work that the kids put in with the respect and everything that they deserve. You know what I mean?
No, that's real cool. So you said you used to coach. Where did you coach at, Jess?
Yeah, so born and raised in LA, right? And then we moved, my family, we moved to Big Bear, like a small town. It's really a resort, like ski town. And so in that small community, I had an opportunity to coach football because I played football. Football was my sport, right? And so that's what I thought I was going to be doing. And then because the school's so small, they needed help. They had like one or two people coaching the wrestling team. And so one of the football coaches was like, yo, I'm the head coach of the wrestling team. I need help. Do you want to come and do this? And I was like, if you're asking me, you must really be struggling. You know what I mean? And so I did, because I'm all about just helping the kids and being positive and whatever kind of influence I can be. So I did, like, went out there, kind of did what I could. But like I said, I realized what was missing in terms of content. So what I was trying to find like the best competition for us to travel to, right? And the events and things like that. And as I was doing all that research and looking into, who are the best wrestler, who are the best events, all that stuff, I just realized, I think my best course is just to get into this full time covering the sport and covering the kids.
That's good. I mean, obviously it sounded like it was a learning curve, right? There was you were doing a lot of research, trying to figure out what was what. But so how long did you coach out there in Big Bear then?
So I coached for 1 year. Now I do have some background. I wrestled all 4 years in high school, but again, it was never really my sport. It was a thing I got into almost on a dare with my cousins that are from Pennsylvania. So I'm from Los Angeles, and maybe there's beat the streets now, but back then in the 90s, it wasn't really like any kind of inner city wrestling programs at all. You kind of really had to be like deliberate to look for it. And that just wasn't my experience. It was football, basketball, baseball. And so I'd have these arguments with my cousins about basketball versus wrestling. And then finally in high school, I saw the wrestling team and I'm like, man, I'm going to prove to them this is easy, right? It's not what they were talking about. I went into that practice room, dropped on my head over and over and over, right? And that kind of humbling experience, I was like, man, I can't go out like that. That's not going to be the last time I'm out on a mat. And so I gave up basketball. What am I, 5'11", white dude? It's not like NBA was in my future anyway. So I just stuck with wrestling, and it became that thing I did in the football off season. So it wasn't like coaching. I was like starting from ground zero, didn't know anything. But it wasn't the direction. If you had told me back then in like 2003, 2004, you're going to be a wrestling coach or be involved in wrestling, I would have thought you were crazy,
Funny. That's a hell of a sport to get into on a dare, dude.
Yeah, right? Say, like never really, you realize the disadvantage you're against the kids that grow up doing it and how it becomes second nature for them, and you're still trying to figure stuff out, like fish out of water and all this kind of stuff. So it's definitely an experience I'm glad I had, and now I'm glad to be a part of the community and doing what I can to help the sport grow.
No, that's cool. So you're saying you coached, and then so how did you transition from coaching at Big Bear for a year or so to get into like journalism about the sport?
All right, so my career, what I do for a job is marketing, right? So I do website, like web design, graphic design, like all that kind of stuff, right? So when we were doing our own tournaments or dual events, I was trying to create like real event atmosphere, the whole town. I'm like, yeah, this is a small town, but there's nothing else for you guys to do. We should be selling out this gym because this is like the only thing going on up here, right? And so I was starting to build a little buzz for the program, get people out. I was creating these little like promo cards for the kids, kind of like UFC fight night kind of promo stuff. And just in doing all that and in the interest I was able to like kind of generate for people coming out, then I thought, I could expand that to like beyond where we're at in Big Bear. And like I said, I think that's kind of like more of my skill set, helping wrestling rather than, like I say, coaching, which I think there's better coaches out there.
Right. So where are you out of now, Jess? Where do you cover California wrestling out of?
Okay, so because I'm born and raised like LA from California, California will always be my main focus. Obviously, when I first got started back in 2017, that was, pretty much California only that I was focusing on. Almost immediately, I got tremendous support from like the Selma community. For whatever reason, the people up in Selma just jumped on what I was doing and showed me a lot of love from the beginning. And because that is my home, California, that'll always be where I focus and my top priority. Obviously, now I live in Baltimore, Maryland. I've moved and I cover more of like a national perspective, but it's still California first as far as I'm concerned. Like if you look at my website, you'll see more California interviews, in-depth like state previews. I work for Flow Wrestling to cover the California State Tournament, right? So California will always be that main thing for me, but obviously I do more than that as well.
Okay.
Well, that's real cool. So now you're talking about your new website that you launched, and I looked at it a little bit. What are your goals with your website? Like, what is it that you ultimately want to do with that?
So obviously the website is really that like digital hub for all the content that I create. So one of the things that I focus on in terms of content is the interviews with the wrestlers, right? So I go around to the different platforms, like I said, Flow Wrestling, right? The other names that are pretty big in wrestling media. And I don't see the same kind of interviews or same kind of stories that I put together, right? So I stand by that I think there's a certain quality, there's a certain just in-depthness to it. And so the website is really just a hub for people to come and get all that content, primarily those interviews, also the event recaps, previews, other news kind of stuff, right? So that's really the goal or the purpose of the site, is to have that one spot for people to come to and they can get everything that I publish and produce.
Okay. And now, do you also go to the events? I mean, obviously on the East Coast, you're probably really close to some of the really good stuff out there. Like, are you going to Super 32, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so last year I went to Super 32 for the first time because it was a lot closer than flying from California. Went to Ironman, went to Beast of the East, Powerade. But then I flew out to Doc B and then went to the California State Tournament, Illinois State Tournament, Pennsylvania, right? So as much as I can get around to, for sure.
Yeah, that's real cool. So since you're saying your main priority, since it's your home state is California, how do you keep track of all the kids? Because there's so many tournaments. Like you said, you're just the big national tournaments that are mostly East West, and you have the ones out here. How do you keep track of everybody's weight and their accomplishments and all that stuff?
Yeah, a lot of that is really just people that I've come to establish relationships with. Some parents that are real heavily involved in their programs that their kids are with, coaches as well that just, keep me informed, that we keep that ongoing dialogue going. And so I can stay a little bit up to date more than maybe others being like all the way across the country, like it's pretty interesting. I think still like that California State preview that I did for Flow Wrestling, for example, I think was, top notch, in depth, and I'm across the country. But that's because it's still my interest and the dedication I have to it. It's just a matter of putting in that work and just caring about the, product that you put out.
So are you going out to Super 32 this year, or are you? You got any plans to do that?
No, I won't. I'll be streaming it.
So are there any kids that you're looking forward to watching out there, or like do you like a certain style of wrestling kid, or you just kind of want to? You don't really matter. You just want to see some real good wrestling.
Right. So whether it was football or even the years I spent wrestling, I'm all about like the slickness, like on your feet. That's one of the things I appreciate about California wrestling as a whole compared to some of the other states around the country that are more like mat wrestling centric. So certainly those that like push the pace, obviously scrambling, stuff that's exciting, right? Those moves and all that stuff. As far as California, I think one thing that a lot of people agree with is being way out away from like the Midwest and the center of wrestling in the country. A lot of kids get overlooked. So again, that's one of those things that I hope that from a national perspective, I'm able to still shine some light on some of those kids that don't get the love because they don't necessarily travel to, North Dakota and then North Carolina, and then now California can't compete in Ironman anymore, so they're missing out on those opportunities. But as far as specific kids, I love to see what Ronnie Ramirez can do. Obviously, that's a state champion. I think, he gets kind of overlooked, certainly by Flo. I don't even know if he's ranked right now. The Cortez twins, Joe Toscano, obviously up a few weights.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, I don't know if Ronnie's ranked or not. I mean, and we've wrestled. I mean, CJ's wrestled Ronnie forever. I mean, I remember they were wrestling when they were like 6, 7 years old. Yeah, Ronnie's always been really good. Was it surprising to see him at 113s registered at Super 32 instead of maybe up?
I was speaking to his mom, confirmed for me that he's at 120. So I don't know if there's some confusion there because in the seating he's in 113, and so I wanted to confirm that. So I reached out to her because under the Super 32 entries he's under the 120, and I was like, wait, what's going on here? So that's another one of those examples of wrestling. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, and information is all kind of confused, and it's weird because it's like a huge tournament, and it should be a lot smoother than that. I don't
Well,
know.
people are going to register wherever. I mean, I know we did, and then you realize, okay, we're going to make this way to we're not, and people move, right? So I think especially with those guys that were very low last year, I mean, they're only growing. I think it's hard to make that weight consistently, and so
yeah.
We'll see how it all takes. I guarantee there's going to be a lot more shifting around by the time everybody gets weighed in.
Well, it's like anything else at Super 32, and even some of the bigger ones. Well, it's usually for sure at Super 32, there'll be guys registered that they don't even show up.
Right. It happens. People
get
hurt.
It happens all the time.
Sick.
Yeah.
COVID, it's still there. I mean, it's always something. But we're super excited. We're going out there. It should be tons of fun to see a lot of high level matches from.
Now, Jess, when you choose to write about certain kids, how do you pick what kid you want to talk about? Is just somebody you think it's cool, or you like the kid, his style, like we were talking earlier? Or how do you choose that?
A lot of that for me goes into when I see, like, for example, we're talking about on a national level, okay, why is this kid not, to me, he should be top 10, top 15, and he's not even in the top 20. Okay, well, now I want to maybe reach out and develop that story a little bit, give him a little more shine because for whatever reason, he's not catching the eye of, Matt Scouts or the other names that are, doing the national rankings. And so I start from that perspective. Then people will reach out to me and say, hey, have you heard of so-and-so I coach, or, my nephew or whatever, and they kind of give me some background on the story, and then that might trigger like, oh, wow, that's like really like, cool, let me reach out. And so I don't just try to hit like the top names or the state champions or whatever. My purpose or hope is to tell the stories of really, first of all, any of the kids that are open. So like, for instance, last year for the California State Tournament, I thought that Buchanan having the trio of freshmen, right? Rockland Zink and CJ Huerta, Joe Toscano, all together coming up, that's a compelling story. So that's one that I reached out to them to put that together, right? Daniel Zapata was just, moved up to number one for who's number one. Well, that's California. So it's like, all right, well, let's shed some more light on that. Because, again, nationally, California doesn't always get that love. But here's a kid right at the top of the rankings. So, let's reach out and do stuff with him. So it's really just a matter of what I think I could create a story around, I guess.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is hard because when they do national rankings, they're always based on you have to go out to national events. And unless you're going to Fargo, unless you're hitting the big ones, then it's hard to make a case. And it's fine that because people just say, well, what's going on with these kids? Why aren't they up there? Well, they didn't show up.
Right.
And you can't get ranked if you didn't show up. And that's how it goes. Now, I disagree or agree. It doesn't really matter because if a kid beats somebody, you're like, clearly this kid beat him at this other tournament, but it wasn't a nationally ranked thing. Then it kind of didn't happen for them.
I'm jumping into doing my own rankings because I was reaching out to people to say, like, hey, who does rankings that you trust the most, right? And the response I was getting was, not really anybody, you should do it. So I'm saying, all right, well, let me see what I can do. And then as soon as you jump into an endeavor like that, you realize, like, oh my God, the scope of the results you have to look at, the way that, like, you see a ranking and you're like, man, head to head, right? That kid beat that kid. But then when you dig deeper and it's like, yeah, but that kid's got like 5 or 6 really quality wins. They haven't wrestled for like 6 months or a year. Like, what do you do with that? And so I get the response and people being like, why, kind of like what you were touching on is like, why is he there and he's not here and this and that? But it's like, man, when you start weeding through like hundreds and hundreds of events, it's like, oh my God, it's mind boggling,
Yeah, especially for a national, when you're taking on like nationally rankings. Woo, I mean, I wouldn't wish that upon anybody because it's hard.
And you're never going to have anybody happy. But like to your point, like you're saying, me personally, I think Matt Scouts as of right now does the better job out of anybody who does it right now, who stays pretty realistic. Like Flo has guys that are ranked at 106, 113. They're never going to see those weights again in their life, right? And then I think Flo, they're the standard right now in wrestling, right, as far as content and all that stuff. But I think they get a little political with some of their choices on who they cover or who they really push and even in their rankings a little bit.
Well, I mean that's the biggest issue, right? So if you're talking about national rankings, I wouldn't say Flo is at the top of the game at all. They put them out, but that doesn't
not ranking wise.
Look at the weight classes right now. Mm-hmm. Who's wrestling those weight classes?
Yeah,
there's nobody wrestling those weight classes. That was last year's weight classes. They got to move forward. And my issue with that is they'll say, well, we're ranking based on last year. No, you're ranking on last year based on the events they went to that you wanted to choose and pick which events mattered.
Right.
And they'll say, yeah, the grandfather of them all, Super 32, Fargo, and those things matter. But I also think there's some issues with that when you're looking at like a kid takes some losses. They went out to national high school duels and they took serious losses and they're still ranked high. How does that happen?
Right. Now, Jess, when you say when you're trying to get into the whole ranking thing, now is it like you'll do like all the other guys where you'll send out a list pretty much after almost every big major tournament, or you're going to try to compile everything overall as a season?
It'll probably be like, so right now my plan is to have the first edition out this week as like a pre-Super 32 rankings. And then obviously after Super 32, we'll make some adjustments. And then it'll be basically as events happen and results come in, I'll try to be making, those adjustments on an ongoing basis. My goal actually, and I'm working on this, is to put together a committee. And my hope is to get people from around the country that are like kind of involved at their local level or around the country in their state or their region, and to have that input almost the way that college football did, where it's not just my voice or my opinion or one perspective and bias comes in and politics come in, but instead we can sort of hammer out what is at least an attempt at a more consensus, top 25 in each weight class.
Yeah, that's actually really cool. That'd probably be a pretty good idea. You would just take kind of like a majority decision on what each kid's ranked or kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it would depend when I get feedback on how involved everyone else can be or wants to be. but it would be, my voice not anymore necessarily carrying weight than anyone else's. It's sort of like, what are the reasons behind why you have so-and-so ranked 5 versus 8 or 3 versus 6 or 10 versus not ranked at all, right? And so there are reasons behind it. So let's hear it. And then, we figure out, what the result or the outcome.
Talking about doing that at the national level? Or are you talking about doing that like, okay. Because that's a daunting task, man. Good luck with that. I think it'll be tough, especially when you're trying to pull from multiple sources. Because I think especially in California, and I only talk about California, but to me, it's very easy. If you go based on head-to-heads and results, right? When people don't have the head-to-head, then it's that conversation of, well, he beat that person, didn't beat him as much or whatever. Then you can get into the granularity. But it's more, I think at the national level, it's so hard because they don't always see each other. It may be a year before they ever see each other, but it's good that you can get that input, look back, look at the different head-to-heads that happen. I mean, that's going to be pretty good, man.
Yeah. Yeah. But, so like one of those things that you see is like you talk about flow or even, Mad Scouts is like you'll see that they have kids nationally ranked differently than, for example, I think Michael Cho does a great job. And when you compare to other states, there really isn't anybody else out there that I think provides that same data behind his rankings, right? And so you'll see with him certain kids in a ranking versus like what Flo has. And so obviously Flo is kind of like surface level with California. So I want to bring somebody else, say from California in and say like, all right, from my perspective and what I've seen, this kid is like 9th in. And then you're like, no. Like I saw him, I was there in person and he, he should be ranked ahead. And so I want that input.
No, that's good because I think when you go down down the rabbit hole and you really look at this, I think California in a way that it's nice is because you do only have one division. You don't have multiple divisions. So it makes it easier in that sense when you're racking and stacking. And I do love what Cho does because it's not ambiguous. Like nobody can say, oh, I don't know how he's doing it. It's easy. He has it right there. It shows you on the column, hey, head-to-heads, significant wins, or those kind of things. I mean, there's always people who are never happy, right? Even at 185s last year with, you had the kid from Vacaville and Montero, right, from Bakersfield. So you had Sandoval and him, and they had this flipping around going on, and I watched the match, and Sandoval, he beat Montero pretty good, and it doesn't matter that he had a bad day, but they flipped those around at the last minute at the state tournament. There was some
you've seen that in a few weight classes.
Yeah, I think Cho has it right a lot of the time with regards to the rankings.
Yeah, no, I think Cho does a good job. Now, for California stuff, speaking of, is that where do you use him a lot to try to get some of your information since he knows probably a lot of the kids?
Oh, I mean, I definitely use his site as a source or just to see sort of what he's like how he's interpreting some of those same results just to see because I come to it with okay, I think this should be the order like 1 2 3 4 and then if he has like something way different, it's like okay, what is he looking at here that I'm missing or there must be something going on, right? So I'm not just gonna like jump and say like no, I got all the answers. And he's definitely a valuable resource. And so I feel like, we should be using all the resources we have available to us. As opposed to saying like we're in competition, right? I don't see him as like competition.
Good, yeah. And like I said, I was going to say like he does a really good job of like how Juan said, he puts the head-to-heads, this guy beat this guy and this guy didn't beat this guy. So I think he shows a real reason on why he ranks guys, where some guys, like you're saying, with some of the bigger plays, they just throw guys wherever without any reasoning behind their ranking, that'd be good if you do something like that on your site.
Yeah, so you could see for his like exactly like what those results are, right? You might disagree and say, hey, I still think this kid should be ahead of this kid, but there's no like lack of transparency. Like he's wide open with this is the data I'm using.
Right. So yeah, I think that's the best thing he does is he pulls that data together, and then the people can argue it, but at the end of the day, the results matter. If a kid did better or went to a tournament and he sometimes they don't see each other all the way to the, maybe to the CIF tournament, and that's the first time they'll see each other, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But they go to similar tournaments. Maybe that one kid didn't do that good. I think results matter, and then at the end of the day, they got to line up, and the right. Usually, he gets it right.
He does. He does a good job. But like you said, like you said earlier, you got to get out and compete. Like we all know Kobe Merrill, and everybody knew going into the state tournament last year, he was better than 13th or whatever he had him ranked, but he still didn't show up. He didn't go to any tournaments. So I think he showed real, unbiased to that whenever he actually ranked him that low. Even though everybody going into it knows he should have been ranked way higher just off of accomplishments and just people he has beaten in the past.
Yeah, but I think you have to do it based on that year.
That's a tough one.
Right.
Yeah.
When a kid doesn't wrestle like for the whole season like that, right? But he's probably top 1 or 2. You can't put him so low that he breaks the whole bracket like in the first round and like takes out the top seed or something like that. That's not fair to the top seed either. But you can't give him the top seed because that's not fair to the kids that have earned that throughout the year. So you gotta find that balance of where to put him in, and I think he did a pretty good job with that. Let me ask you, I know like I'm here as like the guest, but affiliated with the Buchanan program, and I know that we're talking about competition and who sees what. What do you guys feel about that, rule that California can't compete against, Blair, Wyoming Seminary, and that means no more Ironman and in-season tournaments like that?
Just speaking for myself, I see it as kind of injustice to the wrestling kids. Now, we all know that they made the rule because of like football and other bigger sports, but as far as a wrestling perspective, they kind of put, like you said, California kids behind the 8 ball because they don't get some of those high quality matchups. So now the only time you get them is you got to go to Fargo.
It's got to be off season stuff,
and it's or U17s, which make those tournaments a lot more important for maybe a recruiting standpoint. But then it puts kind of the kids under the gun too, because that's almost like they have to perform to the best of their ability at those 2 tournaments, or else they're just kind of stuck doing the Super 32s and the in season stuff.
Well, and I will tell you, I think my perspective on this is the at the end of the day, if you're trying to get recruited to a D1 school, let's say you want to go to the Big Ten, right, where it's at, and so you got to get that national look. You can't just say, okay, well, I was a state placer, top 3, whatever, and think that's the body of evidence. And I do think that California, Central Valley, does themselves a disservice by not doing enough freestyle stuff. That's just my opinion. It doesn't matter. But then they don't go to Fargo. Well, you can't complain about the thing you didn't go to and then the results of that, right? And then let's say you do go to Super 32 and you got sick or you got hurt and now you didn't have a chance to compete at that next thing. So I'm a big proponent of go out there, go compete at the national level as much as you can, because recruiters, I think, they're looking at that national result. I'm trying to recruit you for a national college, and I want to see how you did against the rest of the nation. That's great. You did whatever in California, and it's important. But what else did you back that up? But that's just me. What do you think about that, Jess?
Yeah, no. I mean, that kind of goes back to even doing these rankings is like the first thing you go to are the big events because okay, here's these quality kids and how did you do? And if your name is missing completely, now you're just adding more work for me to do. Right now, I got to go dig deeper. I got to go to those local results. And have you tried to find anything on track wrestling? It's like maddening, right? And so the less you put in front of me, the obstacles, like as a coach recruiting or whatever, like the easier my job is, then I find you, I identify you, and now I got my eyes on you. Like that's nothing but a positive.
Yeah, I agree with you. I what's funny about all this is, so flow, track, name the program that the people use, primarily those 2 to set up accounts or whatever, or set up tournaments. But all the data's in there, right? But the problem is the way that they allow it. So you could try to extract it. It's not that easy, like you said, but it's the bigger issue is like guys have like 6 or 7 profiles, right?
That's exactly where I was going to go with it. You got to search through everybody's profile.
And I love that. What do you think about Flow buying? Right. So what do you think about Flow? Like they own track, right? And so, but they really haven't merged that because then I think it would be easier. Maybe it's easier said than done, but
So you hear like, all right, Flow buys track. And so you think, all right, between the two, whether it's like following the events and the dashboard arena versus the way track does it, all right, they're going to find one like unified way to do it. And they don't. It's like, it's still the same, you know? And then finding athletes, like flow keeps athlete profiles, track keeps athlete profiles. Like you said, there's multiple athlete profiles. You can't really make heads or tails of it when you would think like bringing that together and unifying that, you would find one solution that's smooth for everybody, but they haven't done that.
Yeah,
I don't
not
get
yet.
it.
No, and like the only way to do it, because I've actually had to do it before, because like anytime before when CJ had to register for stuff, we'd register him under Chris, which is his actual real name, right? But then the coaches or whoever else register him under CJ.
Right.
So the only way to get all his his wins or whatever together, like I physically had to go in myself as the parent and like merge the accounts together. But then there's still a bunch of different ones, because then they put CJ with a lowercase or whatever and an uppercase. So I don't even know how many freaking profiles this kid had. At no fault to ourselves,
Well, and that's how it goes. But I always laugh because I'm a numbers guy, right? Numbers don't lie. I always tell people it's not the end all be all, but there is some truth to numbers. So when you look at hey, high percentage shots, what did you take? What did you do? Well, when you're trying to find, I just do a search. Just my own kid, I'll say that. When I do a search, I get stuff from like when he was like 10. The first thing that comes up, it's not the most recent, so it's something I'm like, what the hell? So you have to go deep into it and just to find kind of the content that you're looking for. But look, I love that there's a flow. I love that there is a track wrestling, because there is something that can give you that. And could they do it better? Yeah, I mean, I can almost assure that's very expensive to do what they do.
Oh, sure.
And the content's great. I just think Flow does get the rankings. I think is something I do take issue with how they do it. Other than that, I mean, I love that we can stream. You have a subscription, that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, they definitely provide that service. Like, years ago, you would have access to none of this. So, in a way, you kind of feel like you shouldn't really be too critical, because it's like, wow, it's come a long way from what used to be available to all of us. But there are some times that you're in there and it's like,
well, if they could ever fix just not getting the tournament when we're streaming any national event to not freeze or mess up, I think it'd be no complaints really if they could just get that worked out.
Especially the big ones like Final X and things like that, where they've taken a lot of heat for over the years. But I understand. Like I always tell people, it's easy to say something, but it's the technology and it's very expensive, and then you're at the mercy of the service provider.
Yeah,
if that thing sucks or it didn't work out. But
everybody Monday quarterbacks everything.
for sure.
So Jess, are you coming out for the state tournament this next year? Is that something you're going to come out to California and take a look at?
Oh yeah, no, that'll 100%.
Now, Jess, speaking of the state tournament, like everybody. I mean, me and Juan included, complain, it's too long, it's 3 days, the kids got to do an extra day of weigh-in. If you were given a magic wand to fix or do anything that you want to do at the state tournament, what would you do?
Man, that is tough, because honestly, like having been to, quite a few around the country and getting to experience how different states do it. California, for one thing, the finals, 100%. The event for the finals is done better than anywhere else. Now, I think the timing of it and the way that, in particular, the semifinals hit, that was one of the things. When I was in Illinois, one of the things that stood out, Friday night, the semifinals was almost like a party, and it was almost bigger than the finals. So that was something that stood out to me, being there. It was like something everybody looked forward to. They clear out the gym. They do a whole thing, bring kids back in. And it's like a big deal, the semifinals that Friday night. And I feel like California could probably do something along those lines, rather than the semifinals is early Saturday. Other stuff is going on around it. You don't even necessarily know which mats are the semifinals. And so that's the one thing maybe I would say California could do probably a little better.
You like and to me, I don't really care too much about, either way on how they do it. But did you like, prior to having the girls having their own shine, at a different tournament, or do you like them being with the boys and on the big stage and going one-on-one with the boys as far as finals are concerned?
So I totally get the like feature one match at a time and have the stage they used to have, and you just go that one main event going. And I understand too the possibility of having the girls having their own thing and getting that similar kind of experience. I feel like putting the girls side by side is actually a benefit to California girls wrestling compared again to the states that I was around and where the girls were the next week. And the letdown after that big weekend, you could just tell it wasn't going to have that same turnout, the same attention. And as girls wrestling is the driver of growth in wrestling right now, I feel like it's not a problem to feature them side by side with the boys. I think that California has done that right. Like, I know there were the questions around it when they made that change, but I think it's been good.
I mean, if you're looking at the whole of California wrestling, I think it's been good for the sport. I do think it, because look, I love wrestling. I always tell my son, I love wrestling, and you got to love this more than I do. And I love this a lot, right? And so, but watching it, being in the audience and watching both of them, it's very distracting. And I would love for them to get their moment in this under the lights, right?
So you bring up, or you're triggering something that I remember this past year, actually, that I will say again, California could probably is if they're going to have them wrestle side by side, you have to hold the matches. So girls wrestling right now, there's going to be more falls because the difference between the elite and the next is still a big enough gap that you're going to see more wins by fall in the finals. So if you start running the next match out and the next match out and the next match out while the boys are still like 3 or 4 weights behind, then all of a sudden you have one mat that's empty for like a half an hour. And that doesn't make any sense either. So you should send them out at the same time, right? Do that announcing, all that stuff that they do to feature as the kids come out. Because it was, to me, pretty awkward. Like, you have 3 or 4 pins on the girl side, and now all of a sudden there's like nothing going on a mat for,
Yeah, I think it's part of the, unfortunately it's the nature of what you just described, that level of the top kids in the nation for or the girls in California versus the guys that are just getting there or whatever. And then it happens, right? So you're sitting there, but I do think it's a little distracting. I like that they get their moment because it is about them. At that moment,
Right.
what it took to get there is nothing short of, pretty cool, right?
Right. Yeah. I would almost like to see them, just because there is such a long break between, like you said, the medal matches and then the finals. I'd almost like to see them do like a session before that. Even if you got to push the boys back just a little bit. Like you said, the discrepancy from really good California girls to the other girls that, maybe don't travel to national events and all that. Like you said, you will see all those falls, and you'll see. I don't think it would take that long. And I think it would give them, they're still there with the boys. They're still getting the attendance that they're wanting, and then but they get their moment to shine by themselves. And then same for the boys. You bring them in. However, right after it, you clear the gym or whatever you want to do. For it won't take long to get her. Everybody waits outside anyway, and then the boys have their time to shine. I think that, to me, that would be probably the best way to go about it.
Yeah, I think if you could separate and run like the girls' finals by itself that day and then the boys' finals by itself after, like in a perfect world, that might be what you settle into. This might be the transition to that. One of the states I was at this past year, though, New Jersey, right? What they do, they have the girls' tournament run the week before up into the finals. And then they bring the finalists into the boys' finals. And in that like gap between like the semifinals of the boys ending and the finals of the boys, they run the girls out. But the arena was cleared out. Nobody was there. So the girls come in and they wrestle their state finals in front of nobody. They would have been better off just doing it the whole week.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah.
So there's something
That
to
is
be
what I'm
said
saying.
about
Like,
that.
don't do that.
Yeah, no, that's probably like what you don't want to do.
No, but
Yeah,
I mean, you know, and it's a money thing. I understand for CIF because they didn't want to run two events. They combined them. I do think that it makes the boys have to get 3 days of weighing in, all that good stuff that happens. But you know, it's what makes this sport pretty special. It's not like anybody, you know, everybody doesn't do what we do, and so it takes a lot. But it does put a little more on the kids, right?
Oh, yeah.
So there's some trade offs there. I'm sure CIF hopefully will take a look at it down the road and figure it out. But there's got to be a better way to maximize that, I think.
Yeah, I would think so. But yeah, and so we'll transition a little bit. So Jesse, you have anything that you got pending in the works that you're excited about, like maybe interviews or anything you got coming up?
So a few interviews, you know, throughout California. I'm trying to set up anyway. Cody Merrill. We got Nikkei Zinkin actually coming ahead of Super 32. I'll have a big California preview for the tournament this week. And then obviously other, you know, national stuff, covering, you know, the rest of the states, other interviews with kids, etc. I noticed, like, to give you go back to your question about where I come up with, you know, who am I going to talk to? I noticed there was one kid from the state of Alaska. And so I want to talk to him about making that trip to North Carolina. Like, you're the only one from your state. Like, how to, you know, what is it like to be, you know, one of these big events coming from there and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't. I mean, that's a trip right there, Alaska to North Carolina.
Yeah.
Now, when you interview Nikkei, make sure you ask him how he got his nickname Bear, because that's all you hear. That's all you hear when he's wrestling. Get him, Bear! Come on, Bear!
But that must be weird when he's wrestling Buchanan, right?
Yeah. No, he had some good wins against Buchanan last year with Ray Ray, man. They had two really good matches last year. Those were fun to watch. No, so just real quick, just kind of, you know, shoot out, you know, your social medias and all that good stuff before we kind of wrap everything up here.
Yeah, all right. So obviously the word takedown is pretty common and familiar within the sport, right? So I have modified it a little bit, as you can tell, TKDWN. So basically we're just taking out the vowels, and it's takedownmedia.com. And then on all Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, I'm starting to do some stuff there. So that's where you can find me, Takedown Media. And like I said, takedownmedia.com.
For sure, Jess. We really appreciate you coming on. I mean, it's just get another perspective, you know, and you're covering more of the national scene now, so it's pretty good. And I think people see your articles, right? They read your stuff when you write about California, so keep doing that. I think that's good. Help us grow that sport and get awareness to these kids. I hope you catch Cody Merrill, because that'd be a pretty good thing. Is he working with you on that right now? Or are you saying you're trying to get?
That's what I'm trying. It's in the works.
Yeah.
No, that's very cool. Yeah, like I said, man, thanks for coming on. It was cool to talk to you. We've seen you at some of the tournaments and some of the stuff, and seen a lot of your stuff online, and we just haven't had a chance to talk to you. And it was cool, man. It was nice getting to know you.
Yeah, for sure, man. I appreciate you guys reaching out, you know, asking me to come on. Like I say, you know, California will always be, you know, my love, my heart. And so everything I do, even from that national perspective, will still be keeping an eye on the Golden State. I mean, who knows if, you know, maybe I move back there at some point. Obviously, the Central Valley goes toe-to-toe with any region in the country, right? Lehigh Valley, Whippeal in Pennsylvania, right? Everybody out there, I challenge them to come to the Central Valley, right? They don't make that trip west, but you know, so I'll never forget.
Yeah, but you know, we like how you said before, you like the California, you know, style, you know, the flashy stuff. Where me and Juan particularly, we want to get better on the mat. We want to be more like PA guys, because that's where we kind of fell sometimes, where we lose close matches.
Well, and I mean, honestly, at the next level, you're going to need that, right? At the D1 level, I'd love that, you know, we could do a whole nother segment on the new rule changes, but I love 3-point takedowns. I think it's going to reward that guy that gets after it. And then riding a guy out, I think there's something to be said about that. And then, or get working to the turn and doing something like that. So it's good. I mean, we'll see, man.
I mean, when people talk about the different styles of wrestling, right? Folk style to freestyle, let's just keep those two. It's the mat wrestling and holding a guy down that people really give that credit to folk style for, right? So certainly I respect the kids that can do that, right? And up into the collegiate level, and you're able to ride somebody out. There's nothing harder in the sport. But that's probably why it wasn't my thing, because, like, man, it's too much work.
Oh shit, that's funny.
Well, again, we appreciate you coming on, man. We